Welcome back to Keepers of Our Republic, a weekly nonpartisan podcast talking to election officials and judges about defending the rule of law and free and fair elections, also known as how we keep our republic. I'm your host, Tate Fall. If this is your first time joining us, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and join us here every week on Thursdays for these conversations. Today, I'm joined by Olivia McCall. Olivia is the Director of Elections for Wake County, North Carolina. Prior to assuming the role of director in June 2023, she served as the Deputy Director of Elections in Wake County from 2019 to 2023, and earlier served as the department's business officer from 2016 to 2019. Olivia also served as elections coordinator for Cabarrus County from 2011 to 2013, and subsequently as deputy director from 2013 to 2016. Thank you, Olivia, for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Sure. So why don't you start off? Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into elections, and also tell us why you stay.
So I think a lot of people don't think of elections as a career when you're going through college or when you're growing up. It's one of those things that once you know it's out there and you all of a sudden get this opportunity that matters and you feel that your work matters. It's amazing. And that happened to me right out of college, 2008. It was the presidential election. They were kind of ramping up
Yeah.
with additional staff members to make that work here in Wake County. And I just happened to be at a job fair with my college. And anyway, ended up getting a role really with the early voting side of elections. And I was hooked from day one. I didn't know anything about elections when I got into it. I didn't understand how big of an operation it was and all that it takes. I had voted, I'd been a voter, but you
Yeah.
just don't understand all the things that go on behind the scenes. So, just a little bit about me. 2008, I started in elections. I was hooked. I got married in 2011 and had the opportunity to move to another county and stay in elections, which is what I wanted to do. So that's when I went to Cabarrus County. But when I was in Wake, I worked with the early voting side, and then I got into the campaign finance side, which is also a side of things that a lot of people don't,
Yeah.
know all
Yeah.
that
It's a
goes into.
bear. That's a bear. Oh,
So, that's what I was doing when I left Wake County, but then had the opportunity to go to Cabarrus, which was very similar to Wake County, not in size, but just their operations. They had the same equipment, so I was used to, that equipment and all of that. So that was great, a great transition for me. And then after about 5 years in Cabarrus, I had the opportunity to come back to Wake County. I went to college in Wake County. Our friends and family are here. So it was a great opportunity to come back. And I came back and then went to a couple different roles as business officer and then deputy. And then in 2023, was named director of Wake County. And why I stay in elections, I think I mentioned it a little bit. I really got hooked on it, but I truly love what I do. Every day I learn something new. It's very fast paced. You really have to love elections to stay in it. Truly, there are a lot of sacrifices that staff make to make elections work. But really, at the end of the day, each election, it's an opportunity to serve the community, support voters, and really all the challenges that you have to solve, and you get to work alongside an incredible team. And so that's really what keeps me in elections, is just um that piece of it. And I tell my team all the time, this is something that I think kind of hits home a little bit, but it's amazing that we get to be a part of history. So if you think about it, you're a part of that election and you made it happen. You had a team of people that came together, that made those sacrifices, that have the same vision, to make sure that we're going to do the best that we can do. And we allowed for, people to have their voices heard. So it's just kind of amazing to think of it like that you're a part of history. And I tell our staff all the time, it's probably the most rewarding job you can be in.
I love it. I totally agree. I know I've said before that I think elections is one of those careers where you either love it or you leave. You don't tough it out. It's not gonna happen. And I think, like you said, that's what makes all of you know that you and your whole team, you all have that drive and that dedication. You know, no one's there just for a paycheck because it's not that big. So you know that they're there to show up and serve their voters. And I love that. I think it's so easy for election administrators to just gloss over what you said, that it is putting together history. It's allowing people to be a part of history. I mean, working on the 2008 election, being a part of the election where our first African American president was elected, or, when laws changed, first time you have early voting in person, that's historical, and it's sometimes we get so in the weeds that I like that kind of come up big picture of it because it's important to remember that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Wake County, how many voters you have, how many precincts you have, staff members, and anything that's unique about Wake?
So, Wake County, we are the largest county within all of the counties in North Carolina. So, we have just over 858,000 registered voters. So, again, that puts us above any other county in the state. We make up 11% of the state's voter population. So, anything we do, at a very large scale. And a little bit about North Carolina, all counties are. Uh, just different as far as how many voters they have registered, how many precincts they have to support. So it's really hard to do kind of an apples to apples comparison with any other county. But for Wake County, currently we have 216 election day precincts. So we manage those election day precincts. We could have up to, over 22 early voting sites. This upcoming election, we have 18. So that kind of varies. It's picked by our board as far as how many sites they want ahead of the election cycle. So again, that's kind of a fluid number, but the 216 election day precincts, that's, again, managing that and making sure that you have all of those supplies out, chain of custody, all of the workers to support that. It's a large logistical operation here in Wake County. So something that's kind of neat about us is we moved out in 2019 to about an 80,000 square foot facility. And so we are able to actually train all of our precinct officials. We have all of our operations under one roof, which I know that a lot of election facilities across the country don't have that luxury of being all under one roof, especially as large as we are. But we have a wonderful facility, secure facility. It has all of the, badge access, cameras. We have gates. We have security officers. We are really fortunate here in Wake County that we have all of those things, and I do understand, that that's not that's not the same in every county in North Carolina, especially not across the nation. So we're fortunate here in Wake County that we have that. But again, the support that we get from the county and the partnerships that we have built over the years makes us successful in that we are large and we can scale up. Or if we need support and there's something going on at one or 20 of our precincts, we have the capability of scaling up to whatever challenge comes up. We have about a $13 million budget for FY27. We have 48 FTEs, so full-time employees that work with us, and we scale. When I talk about scalability, we have to scale up for large elections with agency temp staff. So we do contract with an agency to, have election assistants to come in to support, whether it's getting supplies out or inventory or data entry. Again, all of those processes increase getting closer to an election, but it takes the 40-time full-time staff, 365 days per year to make sure that everything's moving like it should. And then we scale up with additional agency staff. And we actually have, if you look at a map of Wake County and look at like like if you overlay maps with districts, we have more jurisdictional combinations than any other county in the state. And we're also the largest all paper ballot voting county in the state of North Carolina. So when you have all those jurisdictional combinations, things can get very complex. We have a lot of ballot styles and so forth because of that. So that's just something that's unique really to Wake County.
Yeah, I feel that pain. I think, coming from Cobb County, I remember in the 24 primary, we had over 2,000 ballot styles between the combos and between, nonpartisan Republican, Democrat. And it was so different coming from Virginia, where I was before that, where it's illegal to have split precincts. So every precinct only had one ballot style. And so it was way easier to handle and it made election day a lot easier too. So I hear you, those combos, I would describe them like a pizza because people would be like, "What is a ballot combo?" And I'd be like, "Okay, congressional district is the crust, and then your state house district is the sauce, and then your state senate district is the cheese, and then some of you have, city school board, so you have pepperoni, others have, county school board, so you have sausage." And it is so much that goes into it. And then not only that, but housing developments are made or apartment buildings go up or lines change, you have to have staff that can understand what they need to do to go in and fix those voter records. That way, those voters get the right ballots. And it's so much to juggle. And I know we'll talk in a little bit about staffing, but I think the logistics piece of it is something that a lot of people don't realize. I think it's just kind of like magic. Right? It just magically happens. And it's not quite how it happens. If it did, we would have a lot more magical, events happening at elections offices, I think. So we talked a little bit about this, but being in a large county comes with so many unique challenges. But you found so many unique and creative ways to overcome those. And I know in 2025, you won a Cleary Award from the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, where I used to work. Shout out EAC, love them, for your Media Partnership and Transparency Initiative, which was so cool to read about. I really enjoyed reading your submission. Why don't you share with our listeners a little bit about what that program was and how it started, and then what is the impact that you've seen kind of come from that initiative?
Yeah, so the media kit actually started just with a simple, hey, we had some media inquiries, we had and they kept asking the same questions. So so about 2018 is when we officially designed like a media kit, which was basically a PDF, with all the right information in there. But it really wasn't designed like just to inform the media, but it was also kind of to help alleviate some of the strain on us at the busiest time. We would have a ton of media questions and and a lot of them were just straightforward answers that they just needed to have the right information to get out into the community. So that media kit started in 2018 and we just kept building on it. So every election cycle, there were lessons learned that we had, or, one year, um, we got a lot of calls because our results weren't up right at 7:30, and I was like, "Well, we need to explain the process of how results come back to us so that message can be put out there instead of it looking like a negative." It's like, "Oh, we shouldn't even expect results to be populated from the precincts until 10 o'clock or later." So we learned from, lessons learned from prior elections and looking at trends kind of, identified by from training or from our staff. And so we basically just kept putting things into this media kit. And it really transitioned from that basic kind of informational packet to basically a fully developed manual that these media partners can look at, and it addressed procedural questions, um legal, what kind of laws are we having to follow, and then just some operational things, as well. So basically kind of having that, being proactive, looking at, hey, this is what's going to happen, let's go ahead and talk about it now, because in the heat of election day, you just don't have time to be pulled in so many different directions. So that was really the basis of it, but it just grew over the years, and it's actually been such a wonderful tool for us to have. And we have even built it out even more, where we have started doing media partnerships ahead of time. And we will go set up the early voting site and invite the media to come look at that so they can get their B-roll, they can get their interviews, they can get, all of the, pictures of, things that they want to use for their photos whenever they do a story. So it really turned out to be one of the best tools that we've created, and we keep building on it. So it's great.
I love that, and I think that that is so easy to replicate in other states too, like, every state has different media markets, right? Your media market in Wake is gonna be different than your more rural counterparts, but they can do something similar, right? Because it's all about having that face, that trusted person there where they can answer the right questions, and then the news gets out the right answers, and I think that that's so critical. Like I said, I think that that's something that no matter the size of a jurisdiction is something that they can do to help improve the messaging that gets out. So I really enjoyed reading about it. And kind of in that same vein, I know you do a lot of voter outreach and education as an office as well at different events all throughout the year. So I'm curious, what questions are your team typically fielding at these events, and what kind of improvements have you seen in voter education, kind of their understanding of the process because of these outreach efforts?
So, outreach events, it's one of those things that we built into our, annual or election kind of processes ahead of an election. We're going to schedule, partner with the libraries or, community events. And so, sometimes the election timeline doesn't always allow a lot of that, time to do outreach events, but we have pretty much made it our standard that before any election, we are getting out in the community and getting, you know, any basically just giving the opportunity for voters to come ask us questions. A lot of them is like, how do I update my information? Or can I just check my information? And so we kind of walk them through that. Here in North Carolina, we do have voter photo ID. So that's one of the biggest questions I think we get is, hey, I've got a driver's license. Does this work? Or I don't have a driver's license. How do I comply with that law. And so it's really giving them the opportunity to ask those questions and us walk them through that to make sure that they know, okay, yeah, I'm ready to vote. My stuff is up to date. Or it's also, hey, how can I get involved? I want to know more about what you do.
Yeah.
Or how do I work at the polls? I went and voted and I saw these people working. Are those, so it's just an opportunity to answer their questions. And I think too for North Carolina, because we have, absentee by mail, we have early voting, and then we have election day. And so one of those, any voter can choose whichever method they want, but it's knowing what those options are and then knowing what timelines, they fall under. So like
Yeah.
when can you vote early? What can you do at early voting? Here in North Carolina, you can actually do same day registration. So if you miss the registration deadline, which is 25 days before the election, you can actually go to an early voting site and register and vote at the same time. But if you wait past that Saturday at 3 is when we end early voting, election day you have to be registered. So it's really getting that information and helping them make a plan for the upcoming election, knowing what they have to have, knowing what their options are, and knowing the dates.
It's so interesting because every state, and you already said this, every state is so different. And when I was in Virginia, we implemented same day registration. So it was a brand new process while we were there, but you could same day register on election day because all of the same day registrations were held as provisional. So we had to wait until Friday where the state did their check, and the state would go in and make sure that these list of provisional voters didn't also cast a ballot in their old jurisdiction if they were registered in another county, if they had moved, and then we could go back and the board could count all those provisional ballots. So again, different, right? Which is why it's so important to know if you have someone moving from Virginia, they need to know that because they would think that they could show up on election day and they couldn't. And that's why it's so important to get out there and just have those low stakes conversations with your voters.
And that's the challenge, you're talking about kind of Wake County. We are a go-to destination as far as people for like whether you're retired or you're working or whatever age you are.
Yeah.
Raleigh, Wake County, we have a lot of booming municipalities in within Wake County. It's the place to be. So we're dealing with a lot of that. Hey, I came from Virginia or I came from California or I came from New York. And so I think that's also part of that being able to meet with various people out in the community and then give them that direct connection to the people that are actually administrating, elections. And so I think that's important too. It kind of builds that trust when they could be not knowing information about North Carolina or what the new laws are here. So it's an opportunity for that too.
Oh, absolutely. And then we kind of talked about this earlier, but another part of running elections in a large county is just the sheer manpower that it takes to make elections successful. It's again part of that magic. People think people just show up, right? And I know you've done a lot of work. We talked about kind of different things you've done to help those seasonal and temporary employees know that they're appreciated. Because I could see it in my seasonal workers. We bust them in, we work them hard, and then we send them home, kind of a thing. And it's easy for them to not feel like a part of the team. And so I'd love for you to share with our listeners a little bit about some of that work you've done and also share with them, our average voter, they probably don't realize how elections are typically staffed. Tell us a little bit about how your office does flex up and down. I know you mentioned a temp staffing agency, so tell us a little bit about that too.
So just kind of taking it back to like, every year you have a different, election cycle that you're dealing with. So depending on the election cycle really determines how many staff you would need for that given election, how many staff you would need for your precincts, early voting, and then of course the logistical challenges that we have here with just sheer volume at our operations center. So really we start well in advance kind of building a budget out, trying to figure out where all those resources are needed. And so we make a plan, we budget it out, and then we work with our agencies to give them a pretty comprehensive, hey, this is what the job is, this is what you'll be doing. We have various teams, so we break our staffing up between different teams. So a lot of skill sets translate between various roles in our office, but there are certain skill sets that, um, that align better with different teams. So that's another thing that is a challenge when you're looking at staffing and where people fit. And really, the biggest thing for us is we make it known that what they're doing matters. Again, it's part of that, what I talked about earlier. It was like you're a part of history, you're a part of this election, and you are allowing and making it possible for these people to have their voices heard. And it's, really that piece of it and making sure that everybody understands that we can't do it without everyone. So, yes, I'm a director in Wake County, but I can't do my job without the team that I have. And I think that that's the biggest thing that you have to make sure that your team feels that. Because it is long hours, long months. We're about sometimes we go 3 months, with not a single day off. So it's you really have to keep reminding everybody like, hey, what you do matters, and just that appreciation is kind of shown through how we all come together, and nobody nobody ever says like, "Oh, I don't wanna do that." It's like, "Hey, I'm done with my work. What can I do next?" And it's just that's the type of people you're working with. And so, that's the amazing part I think about election people is, there's something special about them as far as always going above and beyond, for the role.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it made me think when you were talking, I we had when I was in Arlington in Virginia, we had an older seasonal worker who always came in and she answered phones and did registrations and would help do check-in for early voting at our office. And whenever someone would thank her for being there, which happens a lot, it does happen. People are very grateful, for our time being there. She would say, "It takes all of us together to make voting happen." And, her name was Kitty, and that was just something that really stuck with me because it does. We don't wanna throw a party and not have anyone show up, so it takes the voters coming and doing their duty and casting their ballot, just like it takes everyone from the person who sorted the papers at training to the warehouse people schlepping stuff all over the county, it's a lot, and so it is important for us to remember that it takes all of us together to make that happen.
Absolutely.
Okay, so our last question. As we prepare for a busy fall with our general election, what is your number one piece of advice for voters?
I think, just in general, is make a plan. I think that so many people will wait till the last minute to look at their options, see if they're registered. And again, I think for me, it's making sure that people know that they can do things ahead of time. And again, working with media partnerships, getting stuff out earlier, doing our outreach events. We actually do photo ID outreach events as well, where we can actually go ahead and get people photo IDs. We can print them for them if they don't have a valid photo ID for election purposes. So it's like giving people solutions ahead of time to make sure that they're ready to vote, they have a plan, and doesn't matter if you're planning to vote early or by mail or election day. It's just making sure that people are prepared. Don't wait till the last minute. Check your information. And again, part of that, people moving into Wake County from other states, I think that's the biggest challenge we have is because people wait and it's like, wait a minute, Wake County has a 20 or North Carolina has a 25-day before the election registration deadline, whereas some other county might have something different or other state might have something different. So again, it's really just making that voting plan early and figuring out what works for you and figuring out what method you're going to do and kind of, making sure that you're ready to vote.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, thank you, Olivia, for joining me today and for sharing your insights with our listeners. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another episode talking with more keepers of our republic.